3. The clinking of silverware against fine china was a delicate percussion, a sound I had once found soothing. Tonight, it was a metronome counting down to a disaster I couldn't foresee. We were at Aria, a restaurant where the lighting was low enough to be romantic and the prices were high enough to be reserved for special occasions. This was one of them, our 5th wedding anniversary. Across the starched white tablecloth, my husband, Leo, smiled at me. It was a genuine, heart-stopping smile, the one that still made my stomach perform a gentle somersault, even after half a decade. "Happy anniversary, Alara," he murmured, his voice a low, warm hum that cut through the restaurant's ambient chatter. He reached across the table, his fingers intertwining with mine. His touch was familiar, a safe harbor. "Happy anniversary, my love," I replied, squeezing his hand. To my left sat his father, Richard, a kind, placid man with a permanent look of mild amusement. He raised his glass of Merlot. "To 5 years. May the next 50 be even happier." We all murmured our agreement and sipped from our glasses. The only person who hadn't offered a toast was the one seated to my right, my mother-in-law, Eleanor. She was the matriarch in every sense of the word, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray silk blouse, her silver hair styled in a perfect chignon, her posture ramrod straight. She surveyed the table, her gaze lingering on my intertwined hands with Leo's, her lips pressed into a thin, neutral line that was her version of a public smile. Our relationship was a carefully curated armistice. In the 7 years I had known her, Eleanor had never been overtly cruel. Instead, she specialized in a form of polite, surgical indifference. She was a master of the faint praise, the backhanded compliment, the pointed question disguised as casual curiosity. She made me feel, in 1,000 subtle ways, that I was an outsider, a temporary fixture in a family dynasty she guarded with quiet ferocity. Leo, ever the diplomat, always ran interference. He would laugh off her comments, steer conversations into safer waters, and reassure me in private that his mother was just protective. Her heart was broken a long time ago. He had told me once, years ago, in a rare moment of discussion about the family's central tragedy. She's never really put the pieces back together. The tragedy was Clara, Leo's younger sister. She had been killed in a hit-and-run accident 12 years ago, when she was only 19. It was the unhealed wound in the heart of their family. They rarely spoke of her, but her presence was a constant, a ghostly fourth guest at every gathering. Her photograph, a smiling girl with Leo's warm eyes, sat on the mantelpiece in their home, a shrine of silence. Eleanor's grief had calcified over the years, turning into a hard, protective shell. I understood her pain on an intellectual level, but it didn't make her icy civility any easier to bear. I wanted her to love me, or at least to accept that I made her only living child happy. "The scallops are divine, Eleanor. You should try them," Richard said, trying to draw his wife into the conversation. Eleanor dabbed her lips with a napkin. "I'm fine with my salad, Richard. I don't have much of an appetite tonight." Her eyes flickered towards me for a fraction of a second, and I felt the familiar, irrational prickle of guilt, as if her lack of appetite was somehow my fault. I decided to try as I always did. "Leo was just telling me about the new wing at the hospital, Eleanor. It sounds like the fundraising you did was a huge success." "It was adequate," she said, her voice clipped. She took a slow, deliberate sip of water, her gaze fixed on something over my shoulder. The conversation died. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with things unsaid. It was Leo who, as always, came to the rescue. "Dad, how's the golf swing? Still slicing it into the woods on the 7th hole?" he asked, and just like that, the tension dissipated. Richard launched into a humorous, self-deprecating story about his latest game, and I felt myself relax. I watched Leo, my heart swelling with love. He was the bridge, the buffer, the reason our fragile family ecosystem worked at all. He navigated his mother's moods with a grace that still astonished me. For the next hour, dinner proceeded with a practiced, if slightly hollow, pleasantry. We talked about Richard's golf game, Leo's work as an architect, and a recent trip I had taken for my job as a freelance photographer. I felt Eleanor's scrutiny on me as I spoke, her eyes missing nothing. I told a story about getting lost in the winding streets of Lisbon, and Leo laughed at all the right parts, his eyes crinkling at the corners. For a moment, looking at him, I could forget that his mother was sitting beside me, judging my every word. For a moment it was just us. Dessert arrived. A decadent chocolate lava cake for Leo and me to share, a cheese plate for Richard, and a cup of black coffee for Eleanor. A single candle flickered in the center of our cake. "Make a wish," I whispered to Leo. He closed his eyes for a moment, then blew out the flame. "Done," he said, his eyes sparkling in the candlelight. "But I don't need to wish for much. I have everything I want right here." He leaned in to kiss me. A sweet, chocolate-tinged kiss that was both a promise and a celebration. And it was in that perfect, suspended moment of happiness that the world began to tilt on its axis. As Leo pulled back, Eleanor leaned forward. It wasn't an aggressive movement, but it was sudden and deliberate, capturing all the attention at the table. She beckoned Leo closer, her manicured fingers gesturing with an unnerving urgency. "Leo, a word," she said, her voice low, but carrying a new, sharp edge. Leo looked from his mother to me, a slightly apologetic smile on his face. "Mom, can it wait? We're in the middle of—" "No," she said. The word was a shard of ice. "It cannot." Leo's smile faded. He leaned in, his ear close to his mother's lips. Richard and I sat in silence, watching the bizarre, intimate exchange. I couldn't hear what she was saying. It was a true whisper, a secret stream of venom or news intended only for him. I watched his face, the only clue I had to the content of her words. And what I saw terrified me. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. The warmth drained from his features as if a plug had been pulled. His skin, moments before flushed with wine and happiness, turned a pale, ashen gray. His eyes, which had just been gazing at me with adoration, widened slightly, the pupils dilating. They became dark, bottomless pools of something I had never seen in him before, not anger, not sadness, but a profound and chilling horror. It was as if he was looking at a ghost. He wasn't looking at his mother. He was looking straight through me, as if I wasn't there at all. His body went rigid. The hand that had been resting on my thigh a moment ago was now clenched into a white-knuckled fist on the table. Eleanor finished her whisper and leaned back, her expression one of grim, cold finality. There was no triumph in her eyes, no "I told you so." There was only a bleak, terrible certainty. The world seemed to slow down. I could hear the distant laughter from another table, the scrape of a fork on a plate, the soft music wafting from the speakers. But at our table, a vacuum of silence had formed. Without saying a word, without even a flicker of acknowledgement in my direction, Leo stood up. The legs of his chair scraped loudly against the polished floor, a brutal sound that made several heads turn in our direction. He stood there for a second, a statue of shock, his gaze still fixed on that point in space somewhere behind my head. "Leo," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What is it? What's wrong?" He didn't answer. He didn't even seem to hear me. He turned, not with the fluid grace that was so characteristic of him, but with a stiff, robotic movement. And he walked away. He walked past the other diners, through the ornate entranceway, and out into the night, leaving me sitting there with a half-eaten anniversary cake and a heart that had just been shattered into a million pieces. I was left in shock, staring at the empty space where he had been. My mind raced, trying to grasp what had just happened. An emergency? Had someone died? But why the silence? Why the look of horror? My gaze snapped to Eleanor. She was calmly sipping her coffee, as if her son hadn't just abandoned his wife in the middle of their anniversary dinner. "Eleanor," I said, my voice trembling, "what did you say to him? What happened?" She placed her cup down on its saucer with a delicate, precise click. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, for the first time all evening. And in her eyes, I saw not the cold indifference I was used to, but a deep, ancient well of hatred. It was so raw, so potent, it felt like a physical blow. "I told him the truth," she said, her voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. "Something you should have told him a long time ago." "The truth about what?" I begged, my confusion mounting into panic. "I don't know what you're talking about. What secret?" "I don't have any secrets from Leo." Richard looked utterly bewildered. "Eleanor, for God's sake, what is going on?" "You whisper some nonsense in his ear and he runs off." "It wasn't nonsense, Richard," she said, silencing him with a glacial stare. She turned her venomous gaze back to me. "Don't you? Are you quite sure about that, Elara? Search your memory. Search it very carefully." Her words made no sense. They were a riddle wrapped in malice. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I called Leo. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. His voicemail, his warm, familiar voice, now sounded like a recording from another lifetime. "You've reached Leo. Leave a message." I tried again. Voicemail. And again. Voicemail. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. I stood up, knocking my chair slightly. "I have to go. I have to find him. He doesn't want to be found by you," Eleanor said, her voice following me like a curse. I didn't look back. I threw some cash on the table, far more than my share, grabbed my purse, and practically ran out of the restaurant. The cool night air hit me, but it did nothing to quell the fire in my chest. I scanned the street. Leo's car was gone from its parking spot. The drive home was a blur. My mind was a chaotic storm of possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Had she told him I was having an affair? Impossible. I adored him. My life revolved around him. Had she lied about some terrible financial secret? Had she invented a devastating lie about my family? But what lie could possibly provoke such a reaction? The look on his face, it wasn't the look of a man who'd been told his wife was unfaithful. It was the look of a man whose entire reality had been detonated. And Eleanor's words echoed in my head. "Something you should have told him. Search your memory." It implied the secret was mine, that I was the one hiding something. But what? My life was an open book. My past was mundane. I grew up in a quiet suburb, had a normal childhood, went to college, met Leo, and fell in love. There were no dark chapters, no hidden skeletons. Or were there? Her certainty had planted a seed of doubt in my own mind. Was it possible to have a secret so profound that you yourself didn't know it? I pulled into our driveway. The house was dark. The sight of it, our home, usually a beacon of comfort and safety, filled me with a profound sense of dread. Leo wasn't here. I knew it even before I stepped inside. I walked through the silent rooms. Our wedding photos on the wall seemed to mock me. There we were, smiling, so young, so blissfully unaware. The living room with the couch where we'd cuddle to watch movies. The kitchen where he'd make me pancakes on Sunday mornings. Every object was a memory, and every memory was now tainted by this single, inexplicable moment. I spent the next few hours in a state of suspended agony. I called his phone 50 times. I called his friends. I even called the local hospitals, my voice shaking as I asked if a man matching his description had been admitted. Nothing. He had vanished. I sat on our bed, the place we had shared for 5 years, and I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the shivering that had taken over my body. I replayed the scene at the restaurant over and over again. The low lights, the taste of chocolate, the smile on Leo's face, and then the whisper. Eleanor leaning in, her lips moving, her words flowing like poison into my husband's ear. And the look on his face, the horror, the revulsion. He had looked through me, as if I were a stranger, as if I were a monster. As dawn began to break, painting the sky in pale, in different shades of gray and pink, a terrible thought began to form in my mind. Maybe the secret wasn't about something I had done recently. Maybe it was older, deeper, and maybe, just maybe, Eleanor was right. Maybe there was something buried so deep inside me that I had forgotten it entirely. I didn't know what he would say when he finally returned or called. I didn't know what truth his mother had unearthed. But as I sat there in the ruins of my anniversary, surrounded by the ghosts of a happiness that now felt like a lie, I knew one thing for certain. What he revealed afterward would crush me. The night was the longest of my life. Sleep was an impossible luxury. Every creak of the house, every distant siren, every rustle of leaves outside the window sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, my head snapping up in the desperate, foolish hope that it was him. But the silence that followed was always absolute, a heavy blanket smothering me. I wandered through our home like a ghost, tracing the outlines of our life together. I ran my fingers over the spine of a book he'd been reading. I picked up a coffee mug he'd left by the sink that morning. I stood in the doorway of his study, staring at the architectural models he'd spent hundreds of hours perfecting. Our shared world, once so vibrant and solid, now felt like a fragile museum exhibit, and I was its sole, heartbroken curator. Sometime before dawn, I found myself in front of the bookshelf in the living room, staring at a row of photo albums. I pulled one out, the one from the first year we were married. There we were on our honeymoon in Italy, ridiculously young and sun-kissed. There was a picture of our first Christmas, him wearing a silly reindeer antler headband I'd bought him. And there, tucked near the back, was a photo from one of our first obligatory family dinners at his parents' house. I was standing awkwardly next to Leo, my smile tight and uncertain. Eleanor was in the background, partially obscured, but her disapproving gaze was perfectly in focus. And on the mantelpiece behind her, the photo of Clara. Clara. The name had always been a whisper, a shadow. I'd seen pictures, heard a few sanitized anecdotes from Richard, but the core of her story, the accident, was a forbidden subject. All I knew were the grim basics. A rainy night, a dark road, a driver who never stopped. Leo had once described the aftermath as a black hole that had swallowed his family's joy. His mother's grief, in particular, was a living thing, a malevolent presence in their lives. I had always pitied her for it. Now her grief felt like a weapon, and it had been aimed directly at my heart. What did Clara have to do with me? The question looped endlessly in my mind. Eleanor's words, "Search your memory," haunted me. I closed my eyes and tried. I searched through the filing cabinets of my mind, pulling out drawers from my teenage years, my college days. It was all a hazy collection of proms, exams, first jobs, clumsy dates. There were no gaping holes, no blacked-out sections. There was nothing that could explain the look of utter devastation on my husband's face. It was almost 8 a.m. when I heard the key in the front door. My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic, fluttering bird. I stood up from the couch, my legs weak and unsteady. Leo stepped inside. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes bloodshot and shadowed with a sleepless, tormented exhaustion. His suit, so sharp and elegant last night, was rumpled. He didn't look at me. He closed the door softly behind him and leaned his forehead against it, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Leo," I breathed, taking a tentative step toward him. He flinched, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it stopped me in my tracks. It was a gesture of such profound alienation that it hurt more than a shout would have. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice cracking. I was so worried. I called everyone. He finally lifted his head and turned to face me. The look in his eyes was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. I saw pain, I saw confusion, I saw a deep, cavernous grief. And woven through it all, to my horror, was a thread of the love that had defined our lives. It was that love, still visible beneath the rubble, that made his expression all the more agonizing. "I drove," he said, his voice hoarse. "I just drove all night. I had to think." "Think about what?" I pleaded, taking another step. "Leo, please just talk to me. Your mother, she said things I don't understand. She said I was hiding something. I swear to you, I have no idea what she's talking about. Whatever she told you, it's a lie. It has to be." He let out a hollow, bitter laugh that sounded nothing like him. I wish it were a lie, Elara. My God. I wish it were a lie more than I've ever wished for anything in my life. He walked past me into the living room and sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. His whole body trembled. I knelt on the floor in front of him, my hands hovering, wanting to comfort him but terrified to touch him. Then tell me, I whispered. Whatever it is, we can face it together. We always do. He slowly lowered his hands, and his eyes, raw and red-rimmed, met mine. We can't face this together. This isn't a we. This is about you. And it's about Clara. The name hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. My blood ran cold. Clara? What does your sister have to do with me? He took a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling himself to recount something horrible. My mother, after the police gave up on finding the driver who killed Clara. She never did. For the past 12 years, she's been paying private investigators. Most of them found nothing, dead ends. But this last one, he was different. He was methodical. He went back to the original case files, re-interviewed people who were too scared to talk back then. He paused, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards a past I couldn't see. There was one witness, an old man. He saw a car speeding away from the scene that night. He couldn't get the full license plate, just a partial. 3 letters and a number. For years, it was a dead end. But this new investigator used modern databases, cross-referencing partial plates with DMV records from that year, matching them with the car's description, a dark blue, mid-sized sedan. My heart was pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I had a sickening premonition, a sense of falling from a great height. The investigator found a match, Leo continued, his voice barely a whisper. A 1998 Ford Taurus, dark blue, registered in the state. He finally looked at me, and his expression was one of pure, unadulterated anguish. The car was registered to your father, Elara. The world tilted. The air rushed out of my lungs. What? No, that's impossible. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake. Is it? He asked, his voice flat. The investigator pulled your father's records. He even found a copy of your old learner's permit. You had borrowed the car that night. Do you remember, Elara? October 23rd. A rainy Tuesday night. You told your parents you were going to a friend's house to study. My mind was a whirlwind of denial. No. I don't remember. Can't be true. My dad, he would never, I would never. My mother received the final report yesterday afternoon, he said, his voice breaking. That's what she whispered to me at the table. She showed me the report on her phone under the table right before. The license plate, the car registration with your father's name, a copy of your old driver's permit, the date, the location. It all matched. She told me, the woman you married, the woman sleeping in your bed, is the person who killed your sister and left her to die on the side of the road. A strangled sob escaped my lips. The accusation was so monstrous, so fundamentally impossible, that my brain couldn't process it. Leo, no. Look at me. I would know. I would remember hitting a person. It's not possible to forget something like that. But even as I said it, a sliver of ice-cold doubt pierced through my denial. Search your memory. Eleanor's words. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to force my way back through the fog of 12 years. October. My senior year of high school. Then, a dark blue Ford Taurus. My dad's car. I did borrow it sometimes. The pieces were there, inert and meaningless on their own. Think, Elara, Leo urged, his voice desperate now. The police report said the accident happened on Old Mill Road, near the underpass. There was a street light out. It was dark. It was pouring rain. Old Mill Road. The underpass. And then it happened. A flicker. A flash of imagery, like a corrupted video file trying to play. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud of windshield wipers struggling against a downpour. The glare of my own headlights reflecting off the wet asphalt. A song on the radio, something by a band I used to love. And then a shape. A sudden, dark shape in the road. I gasped, my eyes flying open. What? Leo asked, leaning closer. What did you remember? I thought it was a deer. I stammered, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth as the memory, fragmented and terrifying, began to surface from the deep, dark water where it had been submerged for years. There was a thump, a loud one. I screamed. I slammed on the brakes and the car skidded. The memory was coming faster now, a torrent. I remember the panic, the sheer animal terror. I remember looking in the rearview mirror, seeing nothing but darkness and rain. I remember the voice in my head, a terrified 17-year-old's voice, screaming, "It was just a deer. It was just a deer. Go, go, go." I pulled over a few miles down the road. I whispered, tears streaming down my face as the confession pieced itself together against my will. I was crying, shaking. I got out and looked at the car. There was a dent in the front bumper. I told myself it must have been a deer. I had to believe it. I drove home, and I never told anyone. I pushed it down. I made myself forget. The full, horrific weight of the truth crashed down on me. It wasn't just a deer. It was a person. It was a 19-year-old girl. It was Clara. I collapsed onto the floor, a wave of nausea and self-loathing so powerful it threatened to suffocate me. I was the secret. I was the monster. I was the hit-and-run driver they had been searching for all these years. Leo didn't move to comfort me. He just sat there, watching me, his face a mask of utter desolation. He was looking at the woman he loved and the killer of his sister, all in one person. The contradiction was tearing him apart before my very eyes. "My mother," he said, his voice hollow. "She thinks you knew all along. She thinks you found out who I was, that you sought me out, that you married me as some kind of sick, twisted penance. Or worse, to ensure our family would never find out." "No," I cried, looking up at him through my tears. "Leo, I swear on my life I did not know. I didn't remember. You have to believe me. I loved you. I fell in love with you for you. This changes everything, but it doesn't change that." But how could he believe me? I had lied to myself for 12 years. My own mind had betrayed me, constructing a false reality to protect me from an unbearable truth. How could I ask him to trust me when I couldn't even trust my own memory? The love in his eyes was still there, a flickering ember in a hurricane of pain, but it was being extinguished. I could see it dying. He loved Alara, the photographer, his wife. He could not love this new person, this stranger who was responsible for the greatest tragedy of his life. He finally stood up, his movements stiff and weary. "I can't," he said, his voice breaking completely. "I can't be here right now. I can't look at you. Leo, please," I begged, scrambling to my feet. "Don't leave. I don't know. We can do something. I can turn myself in. I can talk to your mother. I can do anything." "It's too late for that," he said, his back to me. "It's been too late for 12 years. He walked to the front door, his hand resting on the knob. He hesitated for a moment, his shoulders shaking with a silent sob. I prayed he would turn around, that he would say something, anything, to give me a sliver of hope. But he didn't. He opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind him. The first time he had walked away at the restaurant, I had been left in shock. This time I was left in ruin. The silence he left behind was no longer just a lack of sound. It was a chasm, an abyss that had opened up and swallowed my entire life. My marriage, my identity, my past, my future, all of it gone. Obliterated by a single venomous whisper and a memory I never knew I had. I stood alone in the center of our living room, the room we had built together, now a tomb of our dead happiness. I was no longer just a wife whose husband had left. I was a woman who had just discovered she was the villain in her own love story. In the suffocating silence, I was left with the ghost of his sister and the unbearable reflection of the monster I had just met in the mirror.